At 0620 on December 2nd, 1939, Corporal Simo Häyhä crouched in a snowbank 150 meters from the Soviet line near Kolla, Finland, watching his breath freeze in the pre-dawn darkness as temperatures hit minus 40 degrees Celsius. 34 years old, 19 years since mandatory military service, 0 combat kills. The Red Army had invaded Finland 3 days earlier with 450,000 troops, 2,000 tanks, 3,800 aircraft. The entire Soviet Leningrad military district thrown against a nation of 3.7 million people. Finland had mobilized 180,000 men to stop them. Most were farmers, loggers, factory workers who had learned to shoot as children. They carried bolt-action rifles that Soviet commanders called museum pieces. Outdated, obsolete, weapons from another war. Häyhä's rifle was a Finnish M28-30, manufactured at the Sako factory in Riihimäki. Iron sights, no scope. The weapon was based on the Russian Mosin Nagant design from 1891, modified by Finnish gunsmiths who understood what worked in subarctic conditions. The M28-30 weighed 4.2 kilograms loaded. It fired a 7.62 by 54 millimeter round that could kill at 400 meters. Häyhä had owned his rifle for 11 years, practicing on his family farm near Rautjärvi. He knew exactly where every shot would land. The Soviets had modern equipment, semi-automatic rifles, submachine guns, artillery that could level entire forests. But modern equipment froze at minus 40, automatic weapons jammed, vehicle engines seized, tank treads shattered like glass. The bolt-action M28-30 worked in any temperature. Simple mechanism, nothing to freeze, nothing to fail. Häyhä checked his ammunition. 5 rounds in the internal magazine, 150 more in pouches on his belt. Each cartridge had been inspected, wiped clean, kept warm against his body. Cold ammunition could misfire. Cold fingers could fumble a reload. Everything had to be perfect. The first Soviet patrol appeared at 0643, 12 men moving west through the forest toward the Finnish positions at Kolla. They were walking in column formation, bunched together, making noise. Nobody had taught them to move quietly through snow. Nobody had explained that sound, carried differently at minus 40. Every footstep, every clink of equipment, every spoken word traveled like a bell in the frozen air. Häyhä estimated range, 180 meters. Too far for most shooters in this light. Dawn wouldn't arrive until 0830. The forest was still dark, lit only by starlight, reflecting off snow. But Häyhä had grown up hunting in these conditions. He understood how to read shadows, how to track movement, how to lead a target when you couldn't see details, only shapes. If you want to know whether Häyhä's obsolete bolt-action rifle worked against the modern Soviet army, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories from the Winter War. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Häyhä. He selected the rear man in the Soviet patrol. Always shoot from back to front. The men ahead don't see their comrades fall. They keep walking. They don't scatter. Häyhä settled his cheek against the wooden stock. The iron sights aligned on the target's center mass. He exhaled slowly, counted 3 heartbeats, squeezed the trigger. The M28-30 fired. The recoil was familiar, controllable. The muzzle flash was brief. The Soviet soldier dropped without making a sound. The patrol kept walking. Nobody turned around. Nobody checked on the man who had fallen. They assumed he'd slipped on ice, stumbled into a hole, stopped to adjust equipment. They kept moving forward. Häyhä worked the bolt smoothly. The spent casing ejected. A fresh round fed from the magazine. The entire action took 1.8 seconds. He'd practiced this reload 10,000 times on his family farm. Muscle memory. No thought required. The second shot hit the new rear man 4 seconds after the first. The soldier fell forward into the snow. This time, someone noticed. A Soviet officer turned, saw 2 men down, shouted orders. The patrol scattered. Häyhä fired again. Third man down. The Soviets were running now, trying to reach cover, trying to understand where the shots were coming from. Häyhä fired twice more. Fourth and fifth shots. Both hits. 5 men down in 18 seconds. The remaining 7 Soviets disappeared into the forest, running east back toward their own lines. Häyhä didn't pursue. He remained in position, motionless, watching. The Soviet patrol had walked into his kill zone at 0643. By 0645, 5 were dead and 7 were fleeing. 0 shots wasted, 0 positions compromised. Perfect economy of ammunition and movement. This was how Häyhä had been taught to hunt. His father had trained him starting at age 5. Patience, concealment, shot placement. Never waste ammunition. Never reveal your position unnecessarily. Make every shot count. The Finnish defense at Kolla was desperate from the beginning. The Red Army's 155th Rifle Division attacked with 12,000 men supported by tanks and artillery. Finland's JR-34 Regiment defended with 4,000 soldiers and almost no heavy weapons. The mathematics were simple. 3 Soviet soldiers for every Finn. Unlimited ammunition versus strict rationing. Modern equipment versus obsolete rifles. The Finns should have been overrun in 48 hours. But the Soviets had to advance through terrain that favored defense. Dense forest, frozen swamps, narrow logging roads. Tanks couldn't maneuver, artillery couldn't see targets. Infantry had to move through killing zones where Finnish soldiers waited in concealment, and most Soviet attacks happened in conditions that made their numerical advantage meaningless. The Winter War was fought during the darkest months of the year. December through February in Finland meant less than 6 hours of daylight. Sunrise at 9:30, sunset at 3:30. The rest was darkness, twilight, or the strange half-light that came from starlight on snow. The Soviets attacked during daylight when they could see targets and coordinate movement. The Finns attacked at night when Soviet forces were blind, cold, and disorganized. Häyhä operated in both environments, but he preferred the darkness. At night, Soviet observers couldn't spot muzzle flash from 150 meters. At night, their semi-automatic weapons jammed more frequently from the cold. At night, their officers couldn't maintain formation discipline. At night, the Red Army died in the dark while Finnish soldiers moved like ghosts through forests they'd known since childhood. By December 5th, 3 days after his first kills, Häyhä had eliminated 23 Soviet soldiers. His company commander, Lieutenant Juutalainen, kept detailed records. Every kill had to be verified by at least one witness. Every engagement had to be reported with accurate numbers. The Finnish army didn't accept exaggerated claims. Häyhä's tally was conservative, verified, documented. The Soviet 155th Rifle Division began changing tactics. They stopped sending patrols in column formation. They spread out. They moved faster. They varied their routes. But none of it helped. Häyhä was patient. He waited for mistakes, and the Soviets made mistakes constantly. December 8th, 0710 hours. A Soviet squad attempted to probe the Finnish positions north of Kolla. They moved in a skirmish line, 5 meters between each man. Professional formation, correct spacing, but they were silhouetted against the snow in the pre-dawn light. Häyhä engaged from 200 meters. He fired 7 times in 40 seconds. 7 Soviets dropped. The squad retreated. 0 Finnish casualties. December 12th, 15:30 hours. Soviet artillery shelled the Finnish positions for 20 minutes. Standard preparation fire before an infantry assault. The barrage lifted at 1550. Soviet infantry advanced at 1552, but the sun had set at 1530. The attack happened in twilight. The Soviets couldn't see Finnish positions clearly. The Finns could see Soviet silhouettes perfectly. Häyhä killed 9 attackers before they retreated. His total reached 54 confirmed kills in 10 days. The Red Army commanders noticed someone was systematically destroying their patrols, someone with extraordinary accuracy, someone who never missed. They called him the White Death. Finnish soldiers used the term kukkonen, the distant one. He killed from ranges where Soviet soldiers couldn't see him, couldn't hear him, couldn't respond. The Soviet solution was overwhelming firepower. If they couldn't locate the sniper, they would destroy everything in the area. Artillery, barrages increased. Every Finnish position received daily shelling. The forest where Häyhä operated was pounded with thousands of rounds. Trees were blown apart. The ground was churned into frozen craters. Nothing could survive that concentration of fire. Except Häyhä survived because he understood the Soviet artillery patterns. He studied their timing. He noticed they shelled the same areas repeatedly. He predicted when the barrages would come and moved to different positions before the shells arrived. The Soviets were fighting by doctrine. Häyhä was fighting by observation. December 18th marked a change in Soviet tactics. They began sending counter-sniper teams, trained marksmen with scoped rifles. Their mission was to hunt Häyhä, kill the White Death, restore Soviet morale. The counter-sniper teams failed for a simple reason. They used scoped rifles. In -40 temperatures, the scope lenses fogged from the shooter's breath. The moisture froze instantly. The optics became useless. The Soviet snipers had to remove their gloves to wipe the lenses. Their fingers froze in seconds. Häyhä's iron sights never fogged. Metal and air, nothing to freeze. He could shoot continuously without maintenance. He could keep his gloves on. He could operate in conditions that disabled modern equipment. December 22nd, a Soviet sniper team positioned itself 300 meters from Häyhä's primary hunting area. 3 men with scoped Mosin Nagant rifles. They arrived before dawn, set up in concealment, waited for the White Death to reveal his position. Häyhä spotted them at 0745. He watched them for 20 minutes. He studied their discipline, their positioning, their movement patterns. They were competent, well-trained, patient. But they had made 3 mistakes. First, they positioned themselves in a location that had good visibility but limited escape routes. Second, they were focused on the area where Häyhä usually operated, not where he actually was. Third, they assumed he would shoot during daylight. Häyhä waited until 16-20 hours. Twilight. The Soviet snipers had been in position for 8 hours. They were cold, tired, losing focus. The light was failing. They were preparing to withdraw. Häyhä shot the middle sniper first. 280 meters, iron sights. The man dropped without a sound. The other 2 snipers reacted correctly. They didn't move. They scanned for muzzle flash. They tried to identify the shooter's position. Häyhä had already moved 15 meters to his left. Different position, different angle, different sight lines. He shot the second sniper 12 seconds after the first. The third sniper broke discipline. He ran. Häyhä led him by 3 meters and fired. The running man tumbled forward into the snow. 3 Soviet counter-snipers eliminated in 18 seconds. The Red Army stopped sending specialized sniper teams after December 22nd. They declared the mission too dangerous. The White Death couldn't be hunted by conventional means. The Soviet commanders changed strategy again. Instead of trying to kill Häyhä, they would avoid him. Artillery would suppress his operating areas before every infantry movement. Patrols would bypass the sectors where he operated. Attacks would focus on different parts of the Finnish line. This worked better. Häyhä's kill rate decreased in late December, not because his skills diminished, but because the Soviets stopped presenting targets. They learned, they adapted, they paid for that education with 89 dead soldiers. But by December 31st, the tactical situation had changed. The Kolla front stabilized. Both sides dug in. The war of movement became a war of attrition. And in a war of attrition, Häyhä's skills became even more valuable. January 1940 brought the coldest weather of the war. Temperatures dropped to -45°C. Soviet vehicles froze solid. Soldiers died from exposure. Units became combat ineffective from frostbite and hypothermia. The Red Army's numerical advantage meant nothing when half their forces couldn't function in the cold. The Finns attacked. Small unit raids, night operations, hit and run. They moved through terrain the Soviets couldn't navigate, struck isolated positions, withdrew before reinforcements arrived. Häyhä participated in 8 raids during January. His role was overwatch. He positioned himself to cover the assault teams. Any Soviet soldier who tried to respond to the raid had to expose himself, and exposed targets died. January 7th, Finnish assault team attacked a Soviet supply dump near Lemeti. 12 Finns against an estimated 40 Soviet guards. Häyhä provided covering fire from 180 meters. He killed 7 Soviet soldiers in the first 2 minutes of the engagement. The Soviet defense collapsed. The supply dump was destroyed. The assault team withdrew without casualties. January 15th, similar mission. Soviet command post north of Kolla. The target was officers, maps, radio equipment. Häyhä covered the withdrawal route. When Soviet reinforcements arrived, he engaged them at 250 meters in twilight. 6 kills. The reinforcements retreated. The assault team escaped cleanly. By January 31st, Häyhä's verified count reached 219 confirmed kills. 60 days of combat. 219 Soviet soldiers dead. All from bolt-action rifle fire. No automatic weapons. No modern equipment. Just iron sights, patience, and perfect shot placement. The Soviet response escalated. If they couldn't kill Häyhä with counter-snipers, they would kill him with artillery. Heavy barrages targeted his operating areas. Not preparatory fire before attacks, but deliberate attempts to kill one man. Entire batteries fired at suspected sniper positions. The bombardments came at random times. Dawn, midday, twilight, midnight. The Soviets wanted Häyhä to know they were hunting him specifically. They wanted him to feel hunted. They wanted him to make mistakes. Häyhä adapted. He stopped using the same positions twice. He never stayed in one location longer than necessary. He moved constantly, even during artillery barrages. Movement meant survival. February brought the heaviest fighting of the war. The Soviet Stavka demanded results. The war was embarrassing Stalin. Finland should have been conquered in 2 weeks. It had been 12 weeks. The Red Army's reputation was damaged. Stalin ordered new offensives. The Timoshenko Offensive launched on February 1st. 460,000 Soviet troops, 3,000 artillery pieces, 1,000 tanks. The largest concentration of force the Red Army had assembled since the Russian Civil War. The Finnish lines at Kolla faced 97,000 Soviet soldiers. The JR-34 regiment still had only 4,000 effective troops. The mathematics were worse than December. 24 Soviet soldiers for every Finn. But the Finns held. They traded space for time. They withdrew to prepared positions. They made the Soviets pay for every kilometer, and Häyhä continued killing. February 4th, massive Soviet assault on the Kolla positions, wave attacks, human waves advancing through Finnish fire. The Soviets accepted 30% casualties to push through defensive lines. They had the numbers. They could afford the losses. Häyhä fired 97 rounds that day. His fingers bled from working the bolts so frequently. The metal was cold enough to tear skin. He killed 32 Soviet soldiers in 6 hours of combat. Verified by 3 separate witnesses. 32 confirmed kills in 1 day. The Soviet waves kept coming. February 17th, the Finnish lines at Kolla finally broke. Not from Soviet attacks, but from Finnish casualties and ammunition shortages. The JR-34 regiment had lost 60% of its strength. Survivors withdrew to secondary positions. Häyhä withdrew with them. His kill count stood at 505 confirmed. 77 days of combat, 505 Soviet soldiers killed with a bolt-action rifle and iron sights. The highest confirmed sniper kill count of any soldier in any war in human history. The average was 6.5 kills per day, but averages meant nothing. Some days he killed 0. Some days he killed 32. Every day he survived. Every day the Red Army tried to kill him. Every day he moved like a ghost through the winter forest. On March 6, 1940, Häyhä's war ended. A Soviet soldier shot him in the face with an explosive bullet during a firefight near Kolla. The projectile struck his left cheek and exited through his jaw. Half his face was destroyed. He fell unconscious in the snow. Finnish soldiers recovered him 20 minutes later. They thought he was dead. He wasn't breathing. His face was unrecognizable, but they carried him anyway. They didn't leave their own behind. Häyhä regained consciousness 11 days later in a field hospital in Viipuri. The war ended the same day. March 13, 1940, Finland and the Soviet Union signed an armistice. Finland ceded 11% of its territory. The Soviets gained the land they wanted, but they paid for it. The Winter War cost the Red Army 321,000 casualties, 126,875 dead, 188,671 wounded. Finland lost 25,904 dead, 43,557 wounded. A nation of 3.7 million people fought the Soviet colossus to a standstill. The world noticed. Hitler noticed. Stalin noticed. The Red Army's reputation was shattered. The purges of the 1930s had killed competent officers. The survivors were politically reliable but tactically incompetent. The Winter War exposed that weakness. Germany watched carefully. 18 months later, Operation Barbarossa would exploit exactly what Finland had revealed. The Soviet military was massive but brittle, over-reliant on doctrine, undertrained in independent action, vulnerable to decentralized opponents who fought without following Soviet expectations. Häyhä recovered slowly. Surgeons rebuilt his face over months of operations. He learned to speak again. He learned to eat solid food. He lived the rest of his life with permanent disfigurement. He never complained. He returned to farming after the war. He raised dogs. He hunted moose in the same forests where he'd hunted Soviet soldiers. He spoke rarely about the war. When asked about his kill count, he said it was what the record showed. When asked how he felt about killing 505 men, he said he did what his country required. When asked if he regretted anything, he said only that the war happened at all. The Soviet soldiers he killed were conscripts, farm boys from Ukraine and Russia. They didn't choose to invade Finland. They followed orders. Many didn't want to be there. Many died badly in the snow, frozen, alone, far from home. Häyhä understood this. He never claimed to be a hero. He claimed to be a soldier who did his duty, nothing more. The M28-30 rifle he carried through the war was returned to him in 1998. The Finnish government had preserved it in a military museum for 58 years. When they presented it to him, he held the weapon carefully, checked the action, sighted down the barrel. The rifle still worked perfectly. He died on April 1, 2002, at age 96. He outlived the Soviet Union by 11 years. He witnessed the collapse of the empire that had tried to conquer his homeland. He saw Finland remain independent, prosperous, and free. The White Death lived long enough to see that everything he fought for had been preserved. His tactics were studied by military forces worldwide. The Finnish method of defensive warfare in winter conditions became doctrine for multiple nations. The concept of using terrain, weather, and darkness as weapons against numerically superior forces influenced military thinking for generations. The M28-30 rifle became legendary, not because it was modern, because it worked. In -45-degree temperatures, when automatic weapons jammed, when scoped rifles fogged, when modern equipment failed, the simple bolt-action rifle functioned perfectly. Häyhä proved that old technology, properly used, beats modern technology, poorly applied. His iron sights never fogged, his bolt never froze, his ammunition never failed. He operated in darkness when Soviet soldiers couldn't see. He moved through forests Soviet units couldn't navigate. He killed from ranges Soviet return fire couldn't reach. The Soviets mocked Finnish equipment as obsolete. They called the M2830 a museum piece, a relic, an antique from the First World War. They stopped mocking after Häyhä killed their 100th soldier. They stopped mocking after he killed their 200th. By the time he killed his 505th, nobody in the Red Army was laughing about obsolete Finnish rifles. They were too busy dying to men who carried them. The Winter War changed how military forces thought about equipment, training, and doctrine. Modern weapons meant nothing without soldiers who knew how to use them. Numerical superiority meant nothing against opponents who understood their terrain. Technological advantage meant nothing when the technology couldn't function in the operational environment. Häyhä exemplified all of this. One man, one rifle, 505 confirmed kills in 100 days. The deadliest sniper in human history, and he did it with an obsolete bolt-action rifle that everyone said couldn't compete with modern weapons. The rifle worked. The tactics worked. The man who carried that rifle through the frozen Finnish forests worked, and 505 Soviet soldiers died because they underestimated what one determined marksman with an antique weapon could accomplish. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from the darkness of history every single day. Stories about soldiers who changed wars with skill and determination. Real people, real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching. And thank you for making sure Simo Häyhä doesn't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.